The red sand of Ashvera got into everything. Roy Hendricks spat out another mouthful as he climbed over the broken wall. His salvage scanner beeped insistently, pointing him toward the old temple ruins. Something with a power signature was buried in there, probably leftover tech from the survey team that went missing 3 months ago. Roy was good at finding lost things. Ships, equipment, people. Well, he used to be good at finding people. Not anymore. Now he just stuck to metal and circuits. They didn't bleed out in your arms when life support failed. He squeezed through a crack in the temple entrance. The scanner went crazy. Whatever was down here had serious energy output. Way more than a survey drone should have. Roy pulled out his flashlight and started down the stone stairs. The air grew cooler with each step. Ancient carvings covered the walls, showing winged creatures flying over cities. Dragon worship, probably. Every dead civilization seemed to have dragon myths. The stairs ended at a massive chamber. Roy's light couldn't reach the far walls. He walked forward slowly, boots echoing on stone floor. Then he saw it. Chains. Huge crystalline chains, each link as thick as his torso, stretching up into the darkness. They glowed with a faint blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Roy followed them with his flashlight beam until he found what they were holding. His breath caught in his throat. A dragon. An actual living dragon, white as bone, lying on the chamber floor. Her scales gleamed in the dim light. Her eyes were closed. The chains wrapped around her body, her wings, her neck. They dug into her flesh in places, and Roy could see old scars where she'd struggled against them long ago. He should have run. Any sane person would have run. Instead, Roy walked closer. The dragon's eye opened. Silver, like frozen mercury. It fixed on him with an intelligence that made his skin crawl. Then her voice filled his head. Not words exactly, but meaning that bypassed language entirely. Human. You should leave this place. Roy stumbled backward, hand going to the plasma cutter on his belt. You can talk. In my head, I am Shiraveth. I was called the Pale Warden once. Long ago. The mental voice was weak, tired beyond measure. These chains are failing. When they collapse, the energy release will destroy everything for 50 miles. You have perhaps 3 days. Run. Roy looked at the chains again, this time with a mechanic's eye. The glow was uneven, flickering in places. Some links looked cracked. She was right. This was a bomb waiting to go off. How long have you been down here? 3,517 years. Give or take a decade. The number didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Roy stepped closer, examining the nearest chain. The craftsmanship was incredible. Each link connected to nodes that ran along the dragon's body, monitoring something. Biolocks, maybe. He'd seen similar systems on prison ships, but nothing this sophisticated. Why are you chained? Because I made myself judge over those who created me as guardian. The Ashvan built weapons that could crack worlds. I tried to stop them. A faction called the Immolation Church decided I was the greater threat. They were talented engineers. Bitterness filled the mental voice. These chains will not kill me, but they will not let me die either. I've had much time to appreciate the irony. Roy circled slowly, his scanner recording data. The chains weren't just restraints. They were feeding her somehow, keeping her alive but preventing any real movement. The nodes connected directly into her nervous system. Removing them wrong would probably stop her heart. Can they be removed safely? I do not know. I stopped hoping for rescue after the first 1,000 years. Roy pulled out his tablet and started taking measurements. The dragon watched him silently. Finally, she spoke again. What are you doing, human? My job. I find broken things and fix them. Roy photographed the chain connections from multiple angles, though I usually work on ships, not dragons. This is not your concern. The chains will fail regardless of your efforts. Save yourself? Yeah, probably. Roy examined a node cluster where 3 chains met. The crystal structure was fascinating, unlike anything in human databases, but I can't leave someone who needs help. Tried that once. Didn't work out. You will die. Maybe. But I won't die running away. Roy looked up at her massive head. I'm Roy, by the way. Roy Hendricks, former maintenance chief, current salvage contractor, and I think I can get you out of these chains. Shiraveth's eye studied him for a long moment. You are either very brave or very foolish. I've been told both. Roy knelt beside the nearest chain node and pulled out his tools. Probably more the second one, but I figure after 3,500 years, you've earned a second opinion on whether this is impossible. Why would you risk yourself for me? Roy didn't answer right away. He thought about his crew, about watching them die one by one when the life support failed, about how he'd survived because he'd been in the sealed maintenance bay, about the guilt that followed him across 3-star systems. Because I couldn't save the people who mattered before. Maybe I can't save you either, but I have to try. The dragon was silent. Then quietly in his mind, thank you, Roy Hendricks. Even if you fail, thank you for trying. Roy got to work. The chains were more complex than anything he'd ever seen, but complexity just meant more time needed, not impossibility. He had 3 days before they failed. That would have to be enough. Hours passed. Roy mapped the chain network, identifying 7 primary nodes that controlled everything else. They would need to be deactivated simultaneously. He couldn't do it alone. He'd need help, equipment, time. His communicator buzzed. Roy pulled it out and his stomach sank. The message was from Ashvera Colonial Authority. A corporate salvage team had detected the same energy signature he'd followed. They were claiming legal rights to the site and would arrive within 48 hours. Roy looked up at Shiraveth. We have a problem. More than one, I suspect. Yeah. Roy saved his scans and stood up. But let's solve them one at a time. First, I need to figure out how to get these chains off you without killing both of us. Then we'll worry about the people who want to cut you apart for scrap. He walked back toward the stairs, already making plans. Behind him, for the first time in 3,500 years, Shiraveth felt something she'd forgotten existed. Hope. Roy spread the schematics across his portable workbench, the holographic display casting blue light across his tired face. 2 days of analysis and he still didn't understand half of what these chains did. They weren't just restraints. They were a complete life support system, monitoring and adjusting to every biological function Shiraveth had. Your heart rate just increased. Roy glanced at the readouts. Bad memory? Shiraveth's mental presence had grown stronger as they worked together. She could project images now, sharing her past directly into his mind. Currently, she was showing him the Ashvin cities as they'd been, towers of silver and crystal reaching toward purple skies. I am remembering the day I first met the High Council. They treated me as a weapon to be aimed, not a thinking being to be consulted. I should have seen then what they would become. Roy studied the image. The Ashvin had been tall and thin, with 6 fingers and eyes that glowed softly. Beautiful people. What happened to them? They destroyed themselves. The weapons they created were too powerful, their fear too great. When I tried to intervene to stop the madness, they turned on me. The Immolation Church convinced the Council that I was the real threat. They built these chains specifically for me. She showed him another memory. Scientists working frantically, designing chains that would adapt to her biology. They'd spent decades perfecting them. The chains could read her neural patterns, predict her movements, counter any attempt at escape. They grew with her, adjusted to healing, prevented her from dying but also from truly living. It's brilliant work. Roy hated admitting it. Horrible but brilliant. Each node connects to a different neural cluster. They form a complete secondary nervous system. Can they be removed? Roy zoomed in on a node cluster. The crystal had grown tendrils that penetrated deep into her flesh. Not safely. Not alone. I'd need at least 2 more people, maybe 3. The nodes have to be deactivated simultaneously or the feedback will stop your heart. His communicator buzzed again. Roy ignored it. It had been buzzing all morning. The corporate team was getting impatient. Shiraveth's presence touched his mind gently. You could leave. Tell them you found nothing. I have made peace with my fate, have you? Roy looked up at her. Because it seems to me you're still fighting. You warned me about the chains failing. You're sharing memories. That doesn't sound like someone who's made peace. The dragon was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps you are right. Hope is a cruel thing to rediscover after so long without it. A new voice echoed through the chamber. This site is now under corporate jurisdiction. Unauthorized personnel must evacuate immediately. Roy spun around. A woman in expensive salvage gear stood at the chamber entrance, flanked by 2 security drones. She looked around the chamber with cold efficiency, her gaze lingering on Shiraveth. Director Weston. Roy recognized her from the messages. This site is unstable. You shouldn't be here. Our scans detected valuable materials in those chains. Weston walked closer, eyes gleaming with greed. Crystalline structures unlike anything in known databases, worth billions, possibly trillions. I'm claiming them for frontier salvage. Those chains are keeping her alive. and they're about to fail. When they do, the energy release will vaporize everything for miles. Weston pulled out her own scanner, checking the readings. Her expression didn't change. Then we'll need to work quickly. You have 48 hours to stabilize the situation. After that, we begin extraction with or without your cooperation. You can't just cut her apart. It's a dragon, Hendrix. A relic from a dead civilization. Legally, it's salvage, same as any other ancient technology. Weston turned to leave, then paused. 48 hours. Make them count. The drones followed her out. Roy stood frozen, rage building in his chest. He'd seen corporations do terrible things before, but this was different. This wasn't just greed. This was murder. She will kill me. Shiraveth's mental voice was calm. Perhaps it is better this way. A quicker end than waiting for the chains to fail? No. Roy walked back to his workbench. I'm not letting that happen. You cannot stop them alone. Then I'll get help. Roy pulled out his communicator and opened a secure channel. Gwen, you there? Static, then a familiar voice. Roy, haven't heard from you in 2 years. What's wrong? Lieutenant Gwen Park. They'd served together on the Meridian before the accident. She'd tried to stay in touch afterward, but Roy had pushed everyone away. Now he needed her. I need a favor. A big one? Bring your best engineer and some specialized equipment. I'm sending you coordinates. Roy, what's going on? I found someone who needs help. And I can't do it alone. There was a pause. Gwen knew him well enough to hear what he wasn't saying. We'll be there in 6 hours. Roy closed the channel and looked up at Shiraveth. Okay, we have help coming. Now I need you to show me everything. Every memory of these chains being installed. Every detail about how they work. It will hurt you. The memories are not pleasant, I don't care. If I'm going to save you, I need to understand what I'm fighting. Shiraveth hesitated, then opened her mind fully. The memories flooded in. Roy saw through her eyes as the immolation church dragged her into this chamber. He felt her terror as they forced the first chain around her neck. He experienced her agony as the nodes burrowed into her flesh, connecting to her nervous system. He saw decades pass, then centuries, the slow horror of being unable to move, unable to die, unable to do anything but exist in this prison. He felt her mind breaking under the weight of time, then reforming, then breaking again. He experienced her giving up hope, then finding it again, then losing it once more. When the memories finally ended, Roy was on his knees, tears streaming down his face. I am sorry. Shiraveth's presence wrapped around his mind like a protective blanket. I did not mean to cause you such pain. Roy wiped his eyes and stood on shaking legs. Don't apologize. I needed to see it, to understand. He looked at the chains with new eyes. They didn't just imprison you. They tortured you. For 3,500 years. Yes. Roy walked to his workbench and pulled up new schematics. His hands moved with renewed purpose. Then we're going to do more than just remove these chains. We're going to make sure nobody ever builds something like this again. He worked through the night, planning, calculating, preparing. Gwen would arrive soon. They'd need every minute of the 48 hours Weston had given them. Shiraveth watched him work, amazed by his determination. Why do you care so much, Roy Hendrix? You barely know me. Roy didn't look up from his calculations. I told you. I couldn't save my crew. I was in the maintenance bay when life support failed. By the time I got to them, it was too late. I watched them die one by one, and there was nothing I could do. He finally met her gaze. I won't watch someone else die when I have the ability to help. Not again. Even if it costs your life? Even then. Shiraveth felt something stir in her ancient heart. This human, this small, fragile creature was willing to die for her, not because she was powerful or important, but simply because she needed help. Then I will fight as well, she said quietly. I will not give up again. I promise you this, Roy Hendrix. If you help me break these chains, I will not let your sacrifice be in vain. Roy smiled. Good, because I'm going to need you awake and fighting when things get difficult, and they're definitely going to get difficult. 6 hours later, a small ship landed outside the temple. Gwen and a young man climbed out carrying equipment cases. Roy met them at the entrance. Gwen looked older, more worn than he remembered, but her eyes were still sharp. Roy, you look terrible. Thanks. You too. He gestured toward the stairs. Come on. I need to show you something impossible. David Osei stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring at the dragon with his mouth open. The young corporal had barely spoken since they'd entered the chamber. Now he finally found his voice. That's a dragon, an actual dragon. Very observant. Gwen was already unpacking equipment, her military training overriding her shock. Roy, you said 48 hours. We've used up 6 getting here. What's the plan? Roy pulled up his schematics on the larger display unit Gwen had brought. 7 primary nodes control everything. We deactivate them simultaneously, the chains release. Problem is, they've grown into her nervous system. We can't just yank them out. Show me. Gwen studied the diagrams, her expression growing darker. These penetrate deep. Spinal column, major nerve clusters, cardiac tissue. Roy, pulling these out will be like performing surgery without anesthetic. I know. Does she know? Roy glanced at Shiraveth. The dragon's silver eyes watched them calmly. She knows. David finally approached, carrying a specialized scanner. His hand shook slightly. Ma'am, I need to map your neural pathways. It might feel strange. You may proceed, young one. Shiraveth's mental voice was gentle. I appreciate your courtesy. David ran the scanner along her scales, gathering data. Roy watched the readouts appear on his display. The chains had done more damage than he'd thought. They hadn't just connected to Shiraveth's nervous system. They'd replaced parts of it. This is worse than the preliminary scans. Roy highlighted several areas. These nodes aren't just monitoring anymore. They're compensating for neural damage. If we remove them, her body might not remember how to perform basic functions. So we build replacements. Gwen was already pulling components from her equipment cases, temporary neural bridges. They won't be perfect, but they'll keep her alive long enough for her natural healing to take over. Can we fabricate them in time? If we work fast and don't sleep. Gwen handed components to David. You're on fabrication duty. Roy and I will handle the deactivation sequence. They worked through the morning. David proved himself skilled, assembling neural bridges with steady hands despite his nervousness. Gwen coordinated the effort like she was running a military operation. Roy focused on understanding the deactivation sequence, running simulation after simulation. Shiraveth remained still, occasionally sharing memories to help them understand her biology. Roy saw how dragons healed, how their nervous systems differed from human ones. The information was invaluable. You were young when they imprisoned you. Roy studied a memory of Shiraveth flying over the Ashvan cities. How young? By dragon standards, a child. Perhaps 200 years old. We live long lives but mature slowly. Bitterness crept into her mental voice. I thought I knew what was right. I saw the Ashvan building planet-killing weapons and believed I had the moral authority to stop them. I was arrogant. You tried to prevent genocide. That's not arrogance, is it not? I was created to protect them, not rule them. Yet I appointed myself judge over their choices. The Immolation Church was right about one thing. I had become dangerous. Gwen looked up from her work. The people who chained you for 3,500 years don't get to be right about anything. Perhaps. Shiraveth fell silent. Hours passed. The neural bridges took shape. Roy finalized the deactivation sequence. Everything was coming together. Then David's scanner started beeping urgently. We have a problem. The chain degradation is accelerating. Roy checked the readings. We have maybe 30 hours now, not 48. Then we work faster. Gwen didn't look up from her soldering.
David, how many bridges do we have completed?
5 out of 7. Good enough. We'll install those first, finish the last 2 while Roy starts the deactivation. A new alarm sounded. Roy's security system monitoring the temple entrance. He pulled up the cameras and cursed. Weston's here early, with a full extraction team. On the screen, Director Weston led a dozen workers into the temple. They carried heavy cutting equipment and combat drones. She wasn't waiting for the 48 hours. She was taking what she wanted now. We're not ready. David's voice cracked slightly. If they start cutting the chains, the energy feedback will kill everyone. Then we stop them. Gwen pulled out her sidearm, checking the charge. Roy, how long do you need? At least 4 hours. Maybe more. Then you've got it. Gwen headed toward the stairs. David, with me. Roy, you keep working. Wait. Shiraveth's mental presence touched all their minds. I will not let you die for me. Not your choice. Gwen's voice was hard. Roy doesn't abandon people. Neither do I. She and David disappeared up the stairs. Roy heard the first plasma discharge moments later. The fight had begun. Roy forced himself to focus on the nodes. The first one required a precise sequence of commands, each timed perfectly. His hands moved across the interface, sweat dripping down his face. The node responded, loosening its grip slightly. Shiraveth gasped, the mental sound sharp with pain. That hurts more than I expected. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be gentle. I know. Continue. The sounds of fighting echoed down the stairs. Plasma fire, shouting, the metallic clang of drones being destroyed. Roy blocked it out. He had a job to do. The second node was more complicated. It had grown deeper, intertwining with Shiraveth's spinal cord. Roy installed the neural bridge first, connecting it carefully. Then he began the deactivation sequence. Shiraveth's pain flooded through their mental connection. Roy felt her agony as the tendrils withdrew from her nerves. She didn't scream, but her body trembled. Blood, silver and luminous, dripped from where the node released. 2 down. Roy's voice shook. 5 to go. An explosion rocked the chamber. Part of the ceiling collapsed near the entrance. David's voice came over the communicator. They've got heavy ordnance. We can't hold them much longer. Fall back to the secondary position. Gwen's voice was steady despite the chaos. Set up the defense barriers. Roy worked faster. 3rd node, 4th node. Each one hurt Shiraveth worse than the last. The chains had been part of her for so long that removing them was like tearing away pieces of herself. But she endured, trusting him to finish. The 5th node was near her heart. Roy's hands trembled as he attached the neural bridge. This was the most dangerous one. If he made a mistake here, Shiraveth would die. Roy. Shiraveth's mental voice was weak. If this kills me, collapse the temple. Contain the energy release. You will have perhaps 2 minutes to escape. I'm not killing you. Sometimes we do not get to choose. Then I choose to refuse that logic. Roy started the deactivation sequence. You've survived 3,500 years. You can survive 10 more minutes. The node released. Shiraveth's heart stuttered, missed a beat, then caught again. The neural bridge activated, providing temporary support. Roy allowed himself 1 breath of relief, then moved to the 6th node. Another explosion. Closer this time. Through the camera feeds, Roy saw David go down, tackled by a drone. Gwen was fighting 3 attackers at once, her movements precise but desperate. I need more time. Roy spoke into the communicator. Don't have it to give. Gwen's breathing was labored. They're breaking through. Roy looked at the final 2 nodes. Both were critical. Both would take at least an hour each to safely remove. He didn't have an hour. Shiraveth, I need to ask you something terrible. Ask. Can you take more pain? If I speed this up, it's going to hurt worse than anything yet. The dragon's silver eyes met his. Do what you must. Roy modified the deactivation sequence, cutting safety protocols. It was reckless, dangerous, likely to cause permanent damage. But it would be fast. He activated the sequence for both nodes simultaneously. Shiraveth screamed. The sound filled Roy's mind, overwhelming every thought. He felt her agony as the chains tore free, ripping through tissue, severing connections that had existed for millennia. Blood poured from the wounds, but the chains fell away. Roy scrambled to attach the final neural bridges. His hands were covered in Shiraveth's blood, making the components slippery. He forced himself to stay calm, to work precisely despite the chaos around him. The bridges connected. Shiraveth's trembling eased slightly. She was free. All 7 nodes deactivated, all chains released. She could move for the first time in 3,500 years. Gwen, David, get down here now. Footsteps on the stairs. Gwen appeared, dragging an unconscious David. Blood covered her uniform. They're right behind us. Weston's voice echoed through the chamber. Hendricks, stop. You're interfering with corporate property. Roy stood, positioning himself between Weston's team and Shiraveth. She's not property. She's a living being. She's valuable salvage. Move aside or we'll move you. Shiraveth tried to stand. Her legs buckled, unused to movement, but she managed to lift her head, to spread her wings slightly. Even weakened, even barely able to move, she was magnificent. The extraction team stopped, suddenly uncertain. Facing a dragon, even a damaged one, was different from cutting apart a chained prisoner. Weston pulled out a detonator. I've placed charges around the support columns. Move away from the dragon or I'll collapse this entire temple. Roy's blood ran cold. You'll kill everyone, including yourself. My ship is waiting. I'll have plenty of time to escape. Weston smiled coldly. You won't. Weston's thumb hovered over the detonator. Her extraction team had already started backing toward the exit. They knew what was coming. This was just business to them, and dying for a paycheck wasn't in anyone's contract. Roy calculated distances, timing, possibilities. They couldn't reach the exit before the charges blew. Shiravath was too weak to shield them. David was unconscious. Gwen was injured. They were trapped. You're bluffing. Roy kept his voice steady. You want those chains intact? Bringing down the temple destroys them. The crystalline structure will survive. Damaged, yes, but still worth billions. Weston's expression didn't change. I'm giving you 10 seconds to move away from the dragon. Then I trigger the collapse. Shiravath's mental voice touched Roy's mind. Let me try something. When the temple falls, stay close to me. You can barely stand. I do not need to stand to protect those I care for. Roy met her silver eyes and saw determination there. Ancient, unbreakable determination. This dragon had survived 3,500 years of imprisonment. A collapsing temple wasn't going to kill her. 5 seconds. Weston started counting down. Roy grabbed Gwen, who had David over her shoulder. They moved closer to Shiravath. The dragon's wings, atrophied from millennia of disuse, trembled as she tried to spread them. 2, 1. Weston pressed the detonator. The explosions came in sequence, perfectly timed to bring down the support columns. Stone groaned and cracked. The ancient temple, which had stood for thousands of years, began to collapse. Shiravath's wings snapped open. They were magnificent, spanning nearly 40 feet, white as fresh snow. She curved them over Roy, Gwen, and David, forming a protective dome. Her scales, designed to withstand atmospheric re-entry, were harder than any human armor. The temple came down. Tons of stone crashed onto Shiravath's back. She didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't let a single rock through her defense. Roy heard her pain in his mind, a constant low scream of agony, but she held firm. The collapse lasted 30 seconds. When the dust settled, they were buried under rubble. Darkness surrounded them. The only light came from the faint glow of Shiravath's scales. Everyone alive? Gwen's voice was hoarse from dust. Yeah. Roy coughed. David. Breathing. Still unconscious. Gwen checked the young corporal's pulse. Concussion, maybe worse. He needs medical attention. Roy looked up at Shiravath. Her wings still arched over them, but he could see the strain in every muscle. Blood dripped from where stones had cut through even her armored scales. Can you hold this? For a time. Her mental voice was weak. But I am dying, Roy Hendricks. Slowly but certainly. What? The chains are off. You're free. Dragons are not meant to be grounded. Our biology requires flight. The atmospheric pressure changes. The solar radiation at altitude, the very act of moving through the sky. Without these things, our bodies slowly shut down. She shared a memory, showing him dragons flying in formation, their scales absorbing energy from the sun. I have been denied flight for 3,500 years. My body is failing. Roy checked his scanner. She was right. Even with the chains removed, her vital signs were declining. Her heart was struggling, her metabolism collapsing. She needed to fly to heal, but she was too weak to fly. There has to be something we can do. Perhaps you can tell me stories of your world. I would like to die knowing something of the humans who tried to save me. Shiravath's presence wrapped around his mind, gentle and sad. You have been kind, all of you. I am grateful. No. Gwen pulled out her emergency kit, looking for anything that might help. We didn't break you out of those chains just to watch you die. Some fates cannot be avoided. Roy's mind raced. Dragons needed flight to survive. Shiravath was too weak to fly on her own. Therefore, they needed to get her airborne somehow, but how? They were buried under a collapsed temple with no heavy equipment, no resources, nothing but what they carried. Wait. The survey drone. Roy scrambled for his equipment pack, the one that led me here. It crashed nearby. Military-grade thrusters designed to lift heavy cargo. You want to make a jetpack for a dragon? Gwen stared at him. Roy, that's insane. You have a better idea? No, but the drone is buried under tons of rubble. We'd need to dig for hours, maybe days. And even if we found it, those thrusters aren't designed to lift 40 tons of dragon. Then we modify them. Roy pulled out his tablet, already running calculations. It doesn't need to sustain flight, just get her high enough for her biology to activate. A few hundred feet, maybe 1,000. Shiravath's presence stirred with faint hope. It could work. If I can reach sufficient altitude, my body should begin the healing process. But how will you reach the drone? Leave that to me. Roy examined the rubble above them. Shiravath, can you create a small opening? Something I can squeeze through? I can try. The dragon shifted slightly, adjusting her wing position. Stone scraped against stone. A gap appeared, barely wide enough for a person. Roy grabbed his equipment and his flashlight. "Roy, this is suicide." Gwen caught his arm. "The rubble is unstable. It could collapse completely. Then I'll work fast." Roy squeezed through the opening. "Keep David stable. I'll be back in an hour." The gap closed behind him. Roy found himself in a pocket between collapsed sections of the temple. He could hear stone settling, creaking ominously. Every step might trigger another collapse. He climbed carefully, following his scanner toward where the drone should be. The device had been buried in a rockfall before the temple even collapsed. Now it was under even more debris. Roy dug with his hands, moving stones one at a time. His fingers bled. His back screamed in protest. He ignored the pain and kept digging. An hour became 2. His communicator crackled. "Roy, we have movement up here." Weston survived. "She's bringing in more equipment." "How long do we have?" "Maybe 3 hours." "She thinks we're dead. Once she realizes we're not, she'll start cutting through the rubble." Roy dug faster. His scanner showed the drone was close now, just a few more feet. He pulled away a large stone and saw it. The thruster assembly was damaged but intact. Found it. Roy started disconnecting the thrusters. Heading back now. He made the return journey as fast as he dared, dragging the heavy equipment. When he reached the pocket where the others waited, he was exhausted, bleeding, and running on pure determination. Gwen helped pull him and the thrusters through. "You look terrible." Standard operating procedure. Roy collapsed next to his equipment. "Give me 20 minutes to rest, then we'll start modifications." David woke up while Roy recovered. The young corporal was groggy but coherent. "Did we win?" "Not yet." Roy showed him the thrusters. "But we're about to try something really stupid." Together they built a harness system using cables from Gwen's equipment. The thrusters would attach to Shiraveth's chest, providing upward force. It was crude, dangerous, and probably wouldn't work, but it was all they had. This might tear you apart. Roy examined the harness one final time. "The forces involved are tremendous. I am stronger than I look." Shiraveth's mental voice held a hint of her old power. "And I have not given up yet." They heard cutting equipment start up above them. Weston's team was working their way down. "Time was running out. We need to move." Gwen checked her weapon. "When we break out of this pocket, they'll be ready for us. Then we'll have to be faster." Roy attached the final connection to the harness. "Shiraveth, when I power up the thrusters, you'll have about 30 seconds of burn time. Make them count. I will fly, Roy Hendricks. Or I will die trying. Either way, I will be free." Roy powered up the thrusters. They hummed with building energy. Shiraveth gathered what strength she had left, preparing for one final effort. On 3, 1, 2, 3. Shiraveth pushed upward with her legs. Roy triggered the thrusters. The combined force shattered the rubble above them like an explosion. Stone fragments flew in all directions. The dragon burst out of the collapsed temple, carrying Roy, Gwen, and David on her back where they clung to the harness. Weston's team scattered as debris rained down. The director herself dove for cover, shouting orders that nobody followed. The thrusters screamed, pushing Shiraveth upward. She spread her wings, catching the air for the first time in 3,500 years. The muscles were weak, atrophied, barely functional, but they remembered. They climbed. 50 feet, 100, 200, 300 feet. Shiraveth's wings beat desperately, each movement visible agony. The thrusters began to sputter. Roy checked the fuel gauge. 5 seconds left, maybe less. "Come on." He gripped the harness tighter. Just a little higher, 400 feet. The thrusters died. For a moment, they hung in the air. Then gravity remembered them. They started to fall. Shiraveth folded her wings and dove, picking up speed. Roy's stomach lurched. Gwen held David tightly, both of them pressed flat against the dragon's back. The desert rushed up at them with terrible speed. Then Shiraveth spread her wings again. The air caught them, and instead of falling, they were gliding, still descending, but controlled now. Her ancient instincts took over, finding thermals, adjusting, wing angles, doing what dragons had done for millions of years. They weren't going to crash, they were flying. It's working. Roy felt Shiraveth's joy flood through their connection. "Your body remembers." "Yes." The mental voice was stronger now, clearer. Oh yes, it remembers. But they were still losing altitude. Shiraveth's wings couldn't generate enough lift to gain height, only to slow their descent. Roy watched their elevation drop. 200 feet. 100. 50. They hit the sand hard, plowing a furrow through the red desert. Roy tumbled free, rolling across the ground. He lay there for a moment, checking for broken bones. Everything hurt, but nothing seemed seriously damaged. Gwen? David? Alive. Gwen helped David to his feet. The young corporal had a nasty gash on his forehead but was conscious. That was the worst landing I've ever experienced. Better than the alternative. Roy stood and walked to Shiraveth. The dragon lay in the sand, sides heaving, but her eyes were brighter than before. How do you feel? Alive. Shiraveth lifted her head slowly. For the first time in 3,000 years, I feel truly alive. A ship appeared on the horizon, moving fast. Weston's corporate vessel, heavily armed and clearly angry. Roy pulled out his scanner. The ship was locked onto their position. We need to move. Now. I cannot fly far enough yet. Shiraveth struggled to her feet. My strength is returning, but slowly. Then we find cover. Gwen scanned the desert. There. Old canyon system, 2 miles west. They ran. Roy and Gwen supported David between them. Shiraveth limped alongside, her legs still unsteady after so long without use. Behind them, Weston's ship closed the distance. Plasma fire scorched the sand near Roy's feet. The ship was shooting at them. Weston was done being subtle. Into the canyon. Roy pushed the others forward. Shiraveth, can you fly at all? Short bursts, but I cannot carry you. Don't need you to. Just keep yourself alive. They reached the canyon entrance. The ship fired again, missing them by inches. Roy found a cave opening and pushed Gwen and David inside. Shiraveth was too large to fit. Go deeper. Roy handed Gwen his emergency kit. Get David stable, I'll deal with the ship. With what? We're out of weapons. I'll think of something. Weston's ship landed 50 yards from the canyon. The director emerged with a squad of armed mercs. She looked furious. You've cost me billions, Hendricks. That dragon was supposed to be my retirement. She's not your property. Everything on this planet is corporate property, including you, now that you've interfered with salvage operations. Weston gestured to her mercs. Kill the dragon. Wound Hendricks, I want him to watch. The mercs raised their weapons. Roy stepped in front of Shiraveth, knowing it was useless but unable to do anything else. After everything they'd been through, they were going to die in the desert. Then Shiraveth laughed. The sound filled Roy's mind, rich and genuine and utterly unexpected. You find this amusing? Weston demanded. I find it ironic. Shiraveth stood taller, drawing on reserves she'd thought exhausted. You wish to kill me? Others have tried. The Immolation Church tried. They failed. They could only trap me. And now I am free. You can barely stand. True. But I do not need to stand to fight. Shiraveth's eyes blazed with silver fire. I only need to remember who I was. She inhaled deeply. Roy felt energy building around her, the air itself vibrating with power. He'd seen many things in his life, but never anything like this. Shiraveth exhaled. Fire erupted from her mouth, white-hot and brilliant. Not the crude flame of chemical combustion, but dragon fire born of nuclear fusion in her specialized organs. The flames washed over the mercenaries who scattered screaming. Their armor melted. Their weapons exploded. Weston dove for her ship, sprinting with fear overriding greed. She reached the boarding ramp and triggered emergency takeoff. The ship lifted on thrusters, climbing rapidly. Shiraveth's flames pursued it, scorching the hull. Warning alarms shrieked inside the vessel. Weston aimed for orbit, for escape, for anywhere away from the dragon she'd underestimated. The ship's weapon system failed, then life support, then navigation. It limped away, trailing smoke, barely maintaining altitude. Shiraveth stopped breathing fire and collapsed. Roy rushed to her side. That was incredible. That was foolish. The dragon's mental voice was weak again. I used energy I did not have, but it felt good to fight back. Can you move? Not far. The effort has taken everything. Gwen emerged from the cave with David. We need to leave this planet. Weston will be back with reinforcements. I know. Roy checked his communicator. I'm calling in every favor I have. Get us a ship. Get us out of here. Where will we go? Shiraveth asked. Roy didn't have an answer. They couldn't hide a dragon on a human colony. They couldn't return to Ashvera. They were fugitives now, all of them. I don't know, but we'll figure it out. They waited in the canyon while Roy arranged transport. It took 6 hours and cost him every credit he had saved. Finally, a smuggler ship arrived, its captain asking no questions about the unusual cargo. Getting Shiraveth aboard was challenging. The dragon could barely walk, let alone climb a loading ramp. Roy rigged a harness system using the ship's cargo winch. It was undignified and uncomfortable, but it worked. Once in orbit, Roy checked Shiraveth's vitals again. They were improving, but slowly. Too slowly. Your body is still dying. Yes. I need more time in flight, more exposure to solar radiation. Hours of it. Perhaps days. Shiraveth's presence was resigned. I am sorry, Roy. You saved me from the chains, but you cannot save me from biology. Roy stared out the ship's viewport at the stars. There had to be something, some way to help her heal faster. His mind ran through possibilities, discarding each one. Then he saw it. The system's sun burning bright and fierce. How close to a star can you survive? Shiraveth stirred with interest. Very close. Dragon scales are designed to handle re-entry heat. We can absorb solar radiation directly. The ship's captain. Roy headed for the cockpit. He's a smuggler. For enough credits, he'll take us anywhere. 5 minutes later, they were on a new course. Not away from the sun, but toward it. Closer than any normal ship would dare. The captain thought they were insane. He was probably right. They approached the sun over 3 days, dropping closer each orbit. The temperature inside the ship climbed despite the cooling systems. Roy and the others stayed in the most shielded compartments. Shiraveth positioned herself at the cargo bay airlock, her scales absorbing the increasing radiation. Her vitals began to improve. Slowly at first, then faster. Her metabolism jump-started. Her wings regained flexibility. The wounds from the chain started healing. It's working. Roy monitored the readings with growing excitement. Your body is remembering how to function. I feel stronger than I have in millennia. Shiraveth's mental voice regained its power. Bring us closer still. They dropped to an orbit that made the captain threaten to mutiny. The ship's hull glowed red-hot. Shiraveth basked in the stellar radiation like a lizard on a rock, her scales converting the energy into biological fuel. On the 4th day, she could stand without pain. On the 5th, she could walk normally. On the 6th, she stretched her wings fully for the first time since her imprisonment. I am ready. Shiraveth looked at Roy with clear, bright eyes. Ready to truly fly. They found a small moon with an atmosphere, uninhabited and far from any shipping lanes. The smuggler ship landed in a valley surrounded by mountains. Roy, Gwen, and David disembarked with Shiraveth. The dragon stood at the valley's edge, wings spread, looking up at the sky. Roy felt her anticipation through their connection. No thrusters this time. Roy smiled. Just you and the wind. Just me and the wind. Shiraveth crouched, gathering her strength. Then she leaped. Her wings beat once, twice. She climbed steadily, powerfully. This wasn't the desperate struggle from before. This was a dragon remembering who she was meant to be. Roy watched her rise into the sky, sunlight gleaming off white scales. She was magnificent. She was free. Shiraveth climbed higher, her wings cutting through the thin atmosphere with grace that came from millions of years of evolution. Roy tracked her on his scanner, watching her vital signs normalize for the first time since they'd met. She was truly healing now. She's beautiful. David sat on a rock, his head injury bandaged, but his eyes clear. I still can't believe we did it. Neither can I. Roy kept his eyes on the sky. Gwen, what's our situation? Gwen checked her military communicator. Mixed. Weston filed charges against us. Corporate terrorism, destruction of property, interference with salvage operations. Colonial Authority issued warrants. Great. But I sent my full report to my commanding officer, with all the evidence, including the neural scan data from the chains. Command is reviewing it. Gwen sat beside David. There's a chance they'll drop the charges if we can prove Shiraveth is sentient, not salvage. She's definitely sentient. Anyone who spent 5 minutes with her knows that. Corporations don't care about sentience. They care about property rights. Gwen's voice was bitter. Unless we can prove she's legally a person, not a thing, Weston might actually win this. Roy hadn't thought that far ahead. He'd been so focused on freeing Shiraveth that he hadn't considered what came next. Legal battles, court proceedings, endless bureaucracy. The dragon had escaped one prison only to potentially face another. Shiraveth's presence touched his mind. Do not worry about such things, Roy Hendricks. I am free. Whatever happens now, I have had these moments of flight. No court can take that from me. She dove toward them, pulling up at the last moment and landing with surprising grace. Her eyes were bright with joy. I can fly. The mental words were filled with wonder. After 3,500 years, I can fly again. How do you feel? Stronger every moment. The solar radiation helped, but flight is what I truly needed. My body is healing itself now. She stretched her wings, examining them carefully. There is permanent damage. Some scars that will never fade, but I will recover. What will you do now? David asked. Where will you go? Shiraveth was silent for a long moment. I do not know. Ashvara is gone. The Ashvan are extinct. Everything I knew, everyone I protected, lost to time. I am alone. You're not alone. Roy stood. You have us. For how long? You have your own lives, your own duties. I am grateful for everything you have done, but I will not trap you in my problems. Too late for that. Gwen checked her communicator again. Command wants us to return for debriefing. All of us, including Shiraveth. They want to study her. Probably. But they also want to hear the full story. And my commanding officer is reasonable. If anyone can help us navigate the legal situation, it's her. Shiraveth looked uncertain. Roy felt her fear through their connection. She'd been imprisoned once by people who claimed to act for the greater good. The idea of voluntarily walking into another facility terrified her. We won't let them chain you again. Roy met her silver eyes. I promise you that. If they try anything, we walk away. All of us. You would give up your careers for me. Already did when we helped you escape. Gwen stood and stretched. Besides, I've been thinking about leaving the military anyway. Corporate interests are corrupting everything. Maybe it's time for something new. I'm with you. David stood as well, wobbling slightly. Whatever happens, we're a team now. Shiraveth's presence wrapped around all their minds, warm with gratitude and something deeper. Very well. We will face this together. They returned to the smuggler's ship and set course for Colonial Authority headquarters. The journey took 2 weeks. Roy spent the time documenting everything, preparing their case. The neural scan data, the chain's specifications, Shiraveth's memories, everything that proved she was a thinking, feeling being who had been unjustly imprisoned. Gwen contacted legal advocates who specialized in artificial intelligence rights. If they could establish precedent for AI personhood, they might be able to extend it to Shiraveth. David worked on his testimony, practicing his account of events until he could deliver it calmly and precisely. Shiraveth mostly stayed quiet, watching the stars pass by through the viewport. Sometimes she shared memories with Roy, her childhood learning to fly, her early years as a guardian, proud and idealistic, the gradual realization that the Ashvan feared her as much as they needed her, the day the immolation church came for her. Do you hate them? Roy asked once. The Ashvan who imprisoned you? I did for many centuries. But hatred is exhausting and I had much time to think. Shiraveth's mental voice was reflective. They were afraid. I represented power they could not control. In their position, I might have done the same. You're more forgiving than I'd be. Forgiveness is easy when everyone you might blame has been dead for 3,000 years. A hint of sadness colored the thought. There is no one left to hate. They arrived at Authority headquarters expecting hostility. Instead, they found curiosity. Gwen's commanding officer, Colonel Hayes, met them personally at the landing bay. Lieutenant Park. Good to see you. Hayes was a tall woman with sharp eyes and military bearing. She looked at Shiraveth without flinching. And this must be the dragon everyone is talking about. Shiraveth the Pale. The dragon inclined her head respectfully. I understand I have caused considerable trouble. You could say that. Director Weston has been very vocal about her losses. Hayes gestured for them to follow. But I've reviewed Lieutenant Park's report. The neural scan data is compelling. If accurate, what was done to you constitutes torture on a scale I can barely comprehend. They entered a conference room. No restraints, no weapons, just chairs and a table. Hayes sat and gestured for the others to do the same. Shiraveth settled near the viewport, her size making normal furniture impractical. Let's start with the basic question. Hayes looked directly at Shiraveth. What do you want? The dragon seemed surprised by the directness. I want to live freely, to fly, to exist without chains. Do you want citizenship? Legal recognition as a person? I do not know your laws well enough to understand what that means. It means rights, protection, but also responsibilities. If you're recognized as a person, you're subject to laws like anyone else. Hayes pulled up documents on her tablet. The corporate lawyers are arguing your ancient technology. Salvage rights apply. I'm arguing that sentient beings can't be property regardless of origin. But I need your cooperation to make that case. What would you need from me? Testimony. Medical scans. Proof of your cognitive abilities, your emotional capacity, your moral reasoning. Hayes leaned forward. I won't lie to you. This will be invasive, uncomfortable, but it's the only way to establish legal personhood. Shiraveth looked at Roy. He felt her uncertainty through their connection. She'd been prodded and examined for millennia by the chains. The idea of voluntarily submitting to more tests was difficult. You don't have to do this. Roy spoke quietly. We can leave, find somewhere remote, live quietly, and spend my life hiding, running from those who would chain me again? Shiraveth turned back to Hayes. No, I will cooperate with your tests. I will tell my story. If it helps others understand, if it prevents future injustice, then my suffering will have meant something. The process took months. Shiraveth submitted to cognitive tests that proved her intelligence exceeded human norms. She shared memories with psychologists who documented her emotional complexity. She demonstrated moral reasoning in hypothetical scenarios. She learned human law and testified about her imprisonment with clarity and dignity. Public opinion shifted gradually. People saw the neural scan data showing how the chains had tortured her for millennia. They heard her testimony about trying to prevent genocide among the Ashvan. They watched her interact with Roy, Gwen, and David with obvious affection and loyalty. Director Weston's case weakened. Her own crew testified that she'd been willing to kill everyone to secure the chains. The charges against Roy and his team were dropped. Criminal charges were filed against Weston instead. Finally, after 8 months of legal battles, the ruling came. The judge's voice was clear. This court finds that Shiraveth, called the Pale Warden, is a sentient being with full legal personhood under colonial authority law. She cannot be classified as salvage or property. Her imprisonment for 3,500 years is recognized as a crime against her person. Though all responsible parties are deceased, she is granted citizenship and all associated rights. Roy felt Shiraveth's relief flood through their connection. It was over. She was legally free. But freedom came with questions. What did a 3,500-year-old dragon do in human society? Where did she belong? They discussed it over dinner in Roy's small apartment. He'd settled on a colony world known for its open spaces and light regulations. Gwen had taken a job as a security consultant. David was finishing his engineering degree. I could return to Ashvera. Shiraveth's presence was thoughtful. The planet is empty, but it was my home. Would you be happy there alone? Gwen asked. I do not know. I have been alone for so long that I have forgotten what happiness feels like in company. Shiraveth looked at Roy. What will you do? I've had offers. Salvage companies want to hire me after all the publicity, but I don't know if I want to keep doing that work. Roy stared at his drink. I've been running for 3 years trying to escape memories of my crew. But helping you showed me something. I'm better when I'm helping people, not hiding from them. So help people. David said it simply. Help me finish my degree. Help Gwen build her company. Help Shiraveth figure out what comes next. Help Shiraveth how? The dragon's presence filled with an idea she'd been considering. The Ashvan left many things behind. Ruins, technology, knowledge, much of it dangerous. I spent centuries as guardian of that civilization. Perhaps I could serve that role again, but differently. How so? As a guide, a researcher, someone who remembers what the Ashvin created and can help humans understand it safely. Shiraveth's eyes gleamed with purpose. I could prevent others from making the mistakes my creators made. And I would need a team, people I trust. Roy felt something click into place. A purpose, a direction. You're asking us to work with you? I am asking if you would consider it. No chains, no obligations, just a partnership between equals. Gwen and David looked at Roy. He looked at them. They'd been through fire together, literally and figuratively. They'd saved each other's lives. They were more than a team. They were family. I'm in, Roy said. Same, Gwen smiled. Absolutely. David grinned despite his lingering headache. 6 months later, they stood on an Ashvin ruin on a world far from Ashvera. Shiraveth circled overhead, her white scales brilliant in the sun. She called out warnings telepathically as Roy and David approached an ancient power core that was still active after millennia. Careful with that panel. The Ashvin like to trap their technology against thieves. Roy disarmed the trap carefully. Inside, he found intact data cores containing Ashvin scientific knowledge. Valuable, but also dangerous. This was what they did now. They found Ashvin technology and documented it, made it safe, decided what should be shared and what should remain hidden. Gwen coordinated their efforts from their ship, making sure they had supplies and support. David cataloged everything they found. Roy did the delicate work of making ancient technology safe for study. And Shiraveth flew overhead, guardian once more but freely this time, not imposed by creators but chosen by her own will. That evening they camped under alien stars. Roy sat beside a fire, writing in his personal log. The others were asleep. Only Shiraveth remained awake, her silver eyes reflecting firelight. Are you happy? Roy asked quietly. I think so. I am still learning what happiness is after so long without it. Shiraveth's presence was warm. But I fly freely. I choose my purpose. I have companions I care for. If this is not happiness, it is very close. Roy typed one final entry in his log. We're both learning to fly again. Turns out the sky's patient with beginners. He closed the log and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, other Ashvin ruins waited. Other dangers, other discoveries. Other chances to make sure the past's mistakes didn't become the future's tragedies. Shiraveth had waited 3,500 years for freedom. The universe could wait a little longer while they figured out what to do with it. Together they'd find their way. The sky always welcomed those brave enough to fly.